Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome back to Soul Igniting Story, where love, passion, and unforgettable moments come alive. Today, we got a heart-melting tale that will sweep you off your feet. Let's dive right in. What if the person you bullied in high school became worth more than your entire town? Malcolm Carter sat in his cramped apartment above the auto repair shop, scrolling through his phone with a smirk that hadn't changed since senior year. The 10-year reunion was tomorrow night, and he had the perfect plan to relive his glory days. His fingers hovered over a contact he hadn't touched in years. Julian Crane. The class loser, he muttered to himself, remembering the awkward kid with thick glasses who used to cower whenever Malcolm walked by. But here's the thing about assumptions. They can destroy you faster than you realize. Have you ever wondered what happened to that quiet kid everyone picked on? The one who ate lunch alone, got shoved into lockers, and seemed destined for a life of mediocrity? Well, Malcolm was about to find out, and trust me, he wasn't prepared for what he'd discover. As Malcolm hit the call button, completely oblivious of the storm he was about to unleash, let me show you exactly what happened when three arrogant bullies decided to invite their former victim to mock him one last time. Flash forward. The Crestwood High Gymnasium, decorated with golden streamers and flickering lights. The reunion is in full swing. When the double doors open, Julian Crane steps through those doors. But he's nothing like the boy they remember. Gone are the thick glasses, replaced by subtle contacts that reveal piercing blue eyes. His once slouched frame now carries itself with quiet confidence. The expensive tailored suit fits him perfectly, and there's something different about his presence, something that makes conversations pause and heads turn. Malcolm's face drains of color. Derek's jaw literally drops. Travis chokes on his drink. Because the loser they plan to humiliate, he's now worth $12 million. The founder of Noxterra Innovations, the tech genius whose AI productivity tools are used by Fortune 500 companies worldwide. The man who went from eating lunch alone to dining with Silicon Valley executives. But here's where this story gets really interesting. Julian knows exactly why they invited him. He knows about their cruel plan. And he has his own agenda for tonight. What would you do if you discovered the person you tormented had become everything you wish you could be? If their success made your own life look like a footnote? If you've ever felt underestimated? If you've ever been the target of someone's cruelty? Or if you believe that karma eventually finds everyone, hit that like button right now. Because Julian's story is about to show you why you should never underestimate the quiet ones. The three bullies who made his teenage years hell are about to learn a lesson they'll never forget. Not through revenge. No, Julian's too smart for that. Through something far more powerful. The undeniable truth of who he's become. Malcolm thought tonight would be about reliving past victories. Derek assumed they'd get some easy laughs at Julian's expense. Travis expected the same old pushover who used to stutter when cornered. They couldn't have been more wrong. Tonight, in that very gymnasium where they once humiliated him, Julian Crane is about to flip the script so completely that it will change not just this reunion, but the rest of their lives. But let me take you back to where it all began, to the halls of Crestwood High, where a quiet boy with big dreams faced daily torment from three classmates who thought they ruled the world. Because to understand the magnitude of Julian's transformation, you need to witness just how dark those high school years really were, and why what happens at this reunion will leave you speechless. The boy they broke is about to show them what rising from the ashes really looks like. Crestwood High School wasn't just a building. It was a social battlefield where your status determined whether you thrived or barely survived. And for Julian Crane, survival was a daily struggle. Walking through those hallways was like navigating a minefield. Every morning, Julian would slip through the side entrance, hoping to avoid the main corridor where Malcolm Carter held court with his football teammates. But hope was a luxury Julian couldn't afford for long. Malcolm Carter was everything Julian wasn't. 6'2", broad shoulders that filled out his Letterman jacket perfectly, and the kind of natural charisma that made teachers look the other way when he crossed the line. As captain of the football team, Malcolm had earned the right to rule Crestwood High's social hierarchy, and he used that power ruthlessly. "There's our favorite computer nerd," Malcolm would announce whenever he spotted Julian, his voice carrying that particular brand of cruelty that teenagers perfect. Still coding your way to nowhere, Crane? The hallway would fall silent. Other students would stop mid-conversation, some laughing nervously, others looking away in uncomfortable recognition of what was about to unfold, because everyone knew what came next. Julian's lunch money would disappear from his backpack. His carefully organized homework would be scattered across the floor. His glasses, already held together with tape from previous encounters, would be knocked askew as Malcolm's friends joined the show. But Malcolm wasn't the only predator hunting Julian through those halls. Derek Thompson brought psychological warfare to an art form where Malcolm used brute force. Derek deployed surgical precision. He was the star of the basketball team, quick on his feet, and even quicker with cutting remarks that left deeper wounds than any physical blow. Derek's specialty was spreading rumors. Did you hear Julian's mom has to work 3 jobs just to afford his cheap clothes? He'd whisper loud enough for half the cafeteria to hear. No wonder he smells like desperation. The lies would spread faster than wildfire through the school's social network. Julian would walk into classrooms and feel the weight of whispered conversations die as he entered. Groups would part as he passed, creating invisible barriers that reminded him daily of his place in their world. Then there was Travis Mitchell, the most dangerous of the 3, because his cruelty came wrapped in entertainment. Travis had the voice of an angel and the soul of a devil. He could make an entire auditorium laugh while destroying someone's spirit, and he did it with a smile that made adults think he was just being playful. The talent show incident still burned in Julian's memory like acid. He had worked for weeks on a simple robotics demonstration. Nothing fancy, just a small robot that could navigate obstacles. It represented hours of programming, countless failed attempts, and the small hope that maybe, just maybe, he could show his classmates there was more to him than they realized. Travis took the stage right after Julian's presentation. The applause for Julian's robot had been polite, but sparse, the kind of courtesy clapping that feels worse than silence. Travis grabbed the microphone with that trademark grin. "Wow, Julian, that was something," Travis began, his voice carrying perfectly to every corner of the auditorium. "I mean, who needs friends when you can build them, right?" The laughter started small, but grew as Travis warmed up. "I heard Julian's planning to take that robot to prom. At least he'll finally have a date that won't run away." The auditorium erupted. Students were laughing so hard they were wiping tears from their eyes. Even some teachers were trying to hide smiles behind their hands. Julian stood frozen on the side of the stage, watching his moment of pride transform into public humiliation. But Travis wasn't finished. You know what the best part is? The only thing Julian's robot can build is more reasons for him to stay home alone. The crowd was in hysterics now. Maybe next year he can program it to make him some friends. Julian felt something break inside him that night. Not his spirit, that had been cracked so many times it had developed calluses. What broke was his last connection to the hope that high school might get better, that his classmates might see him as something more than entertainment. The worst part wasn't the laughter. It was the silence that followed him home. His mother, Maria Crane, worked double shifts at the local diner and cleaned offices at night just to keep their small apartment and put food on the table. She never complained. But Julian could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her shoulders sagged when she thought he wasn't looking. He couldn't bear to tell her about the daily torment at school. She had enough burdens. So Julian found refuge in the only place that made sense to him, the computer lab. While his classmates were at parties or football games, Julian spent his evenings in that fluorescent-lit room, learning programming languages like other kids learn song lyrics. Python, Java, C++. Each new language was like discovering a secret door to a world where logic mattered more than social status, where problems had solutions, and where his mind could finally run free. Mrs. Henderson, the computer science teacher, noticed Julian's dedication but didn't fully understand its source. She saw a gifted student pushing himself to excel. She couldn't see the wounded teenager using code as armor against a world that seemed determined to destroy him. "You have real talent, Julian," she would tell him as she locked up the lab for the night. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." But during the day, conviction was harder to maintain. When Derek would corner him by the lockers and call him worthless, when Malcolm would trip in the hallway and laugh as his books scattered, when Travis would leave the cafeteria and mocking whatever Julian wore or said or did. Those moments tested every piece of self-belief he tried to build. The trio had turned bullying Julian into their favorite sport. They had their roles perfected. Malcolm provided the muscle, Derek delivered the psychological damage, and Travis made it all seem like harmless fun. Together, they created a three-headed monster that made Julian's existence at Crestwood High a living nightmare. Other students learned to look away. Teachers who witnessed a harmless teasing would occasionally tell boys to ease up, but never with real authority. The administration seemed to operate on the principle that boys will be boys, and if Julian couldn't handle a little rough treatment, maybe he needed to toughen up. What they didn't understand was that Julian was getting tougher. Every insult, every humiliation, every moment of isolation was forging something steel-hard inside him, not bitterness. Julian was too smart for that poison. Instead, he was developing something far more dangerous to his tormentors, unshakable determination. Late at night, when the diner was closed and his mother was finally asleep, Julian would sit at his second-hand laptop and make himself a promise. Someday, he would prove that their cruelty had only made him stronger. Someday, he would show them what the class loser was really capable of. Drop a comment if you ever had to find strength you didn't know you had. But here's what Malcolm, Derek, and Travis didn't know about Julian during those dark high school years. Something that would have terrified them if they had possessed the intelligence to recognize it. While they were peaking, Julian was preparing. Graduation day at Crestwood High was supposed to be a celebration of new beginnings. For most students, it was exactly that. But the contrast between Julian's quiet determination and his tormentors' loud celebrations revealed everything you needed to know about who would truly succeed in life. Malcolm Carter stood on the football field in his cap and gown, surrounded by teammates and admirers, already talking about his full ride to State University. The local newspaper had run a feature story about him titled, "Crestwood's Golden Boy Heads to College Glory." His parents beamed with pride as camera flashes captured what everyone assumed would be the launching pad for a legendary career. Derek Thompson was busy signing yearbooks and promising to keep in touch, his basketball scholarship to a Division II school seeming like a guaranteed ticket to the NBA in his 17-year-old mind. College scouts had been calling all semester, and Derek basked in the attention like he was already a professional athlete. Travis Mitchell performed one final song for graduating class, his voice carrying across the ceremony as parents wiped away proud tears. A local record producer had shown interest in his demo tape, and Travis was convinced he'd be signing a record deal within the year. They were living their peak moments, completely unaware that life doesn't care about your high school status. Julian Crane sat in the back row of the graduating class, largely ignored by the celebration around him. No newspaper features, no scholarship announcements, no crowds of admirers. Just a quiet teenager with thick glasses, and a secret that would have stunned his classmates if they had bothered to pay attention. 3 weeks before graduation, Julian had won the Regional Technology Innovation Competition with an app he'd coded in his bedroom. The prize wasn't just a $5,000 scholarship. It was the attention of Dr. Patricia Walsh, a computer science professor at the community college who saw something extraordinary in Julian's work. "This isn't just code," Dr. Walsh had told him after reviewing his submission. "This is elegant problem solving. You don't just write programs. You create solutions." While his classmates were planning summer parties, Julian was planning his escape from everything that had tried to define him. The transition from high school graduate to college student should have been smooth, but Julian's path was anything but easy. The community college was a 40-minute bus ride from home, and Julian made that journey every single day with the determination of someone who knew this was his only shot at a different life. His first semester was a revelation. Programming courses that challenged students with advanced concepts became playgrounds for Julian's mind. While classmates struggled with basic algorithms, Julian was building complex applications that impressed even his professors. Dr. Walsh became more than an instructor. She became a mentor who recognized Julian's potential and pushed him beyond what he thought possible. "You're not just learning to code, Julian," she told him during one of their after-class sessions. "You're learning to think like an innovator. That's a rare gift." But Julian's real breakthrough came during his second semester when Dr. Walsh introduced him to a Silicon Valley startup incubator program, looking for promising young developers. The program was highly competitive, accepting only 20 students nationwide, but Dr. Walsh was convinced Julian had what it took. The application process was grueling. Julian had to submit a portfolio of his work, complete a series of technical challenges, and participate in video interviews with tech industry veterans who had launched billion-dollar companies. The night before the final interview, Julian sat in his small bedroom, looking at the same laptop where he'd sought refuge from years of bullying. The difference was that now, instead of escaping into code, he was using code to build his escape. The acceptance email arrived on a Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m. Julian read it 3 times before the reality hit him. He was heading to Silicon Valley. The move to California was like stepping into an alternate universe. After 18 years in Crestwood, where innovation meant a new play for the football team, Julian found himself surrounded by people who spoke his language, literally and figuratively. Python, JavaScript, machine learning algorithms, artificial intelligence frameworks. Conversations that would have made him a target for mockery back home were everyday discussions among his peers. The incubator program was intense. 12-hour days learning cutting-edge technologies, workshops led by entrepreneurs who had built companies from nothing, and constant pressure to push beyond conventional thinking. But for Julian, it felt like coming home. His project for the program was ambitious. An AI-powered productivity tool that could learn user behavior patterns and optimize workflow efficiency. While other participants created apps for social media or gaming, Julian focused on solving real problems for real businesses. The prototype caught attention immediately, not just from his instructors, but from actual venture capitalists who visited the program looking for the next big thing. Marcus Chun, a partner at Elevation Ventures, pulled Julian aside after his final presentation. "I've been investing in tech companies for 15 years, Marcus said, "and what you built here isn't just impressive, it's necessary. Every business in America needs this solution." That conversation led to Julian's first real funding offer, $250,000 in seed money to develop his productivity tool into a full-scale company. At 19 years old, Julian Crane became the founder and CEO of Noxterra Innovations. The early days of running a startup were harder than anything he'd experienced at Crestwood High. The bullying had been cruel, but at least it was predictable. Building a company meant facing rejection from potential clients, debugging code that broke at crucial moments, and managing cash flow when every month felt like it might be the last. There were nights when Julian questioned everything. When a major client demo failed because of a server crash. When a competitor launched a similar product with better marketing. When the bank account dropped low enough that Julian had to choose between paying his developers or keeping the lights on in their tiny Silicon Valley office. But here's the difference between Julian and his former tormentors. While they had peaked in high school, Julian had spent those years building resilience. Every insult, every humiliation, every moment of isolation had taught him that setbacks were temporary, but determination was permanent. The breakthrough came in year 2 when a Fortune 500 company signed $1 million contract to implement Noxterra's AI productivity suite across all their departments. Within 6 months, word had spread through corporate networks, and Julian was fielding calls from companies around the world. By age 23, Noxterra Innovations was valued at $50 million. Julian had gone from eating lunch alone to dining with CEOs who managed budgets larger than Crestwood's entire annual economy. But success didn't change Julian's core character. It revealed it. While he could have spent his millions on revenge fantasies or showing off, Julian remained focused on building something meaningful. He hired developers who had faced their own struggles, created internship programs for students from underprivileged backgrounds, and never forgot what it felt like to be underestimated. The personal transformation was just as dramatic as the professional one. The awkward teenager with thick glasses had grown into a confident leader who commanded respect in boardrooms across Silicon Valley. Julian still wore glasses, but now they were designer frames that complemented his sharp suits and easy smile. He'd learned to speak with authority, to negotiate with seasoned executives, and to carry himself with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your worth. Most importantly, Julian had learned the difference between revenge and success. Revenge would have been temporary satisfaction. Success was permanent transformation. Comment, transformation. If you believe everyone deserves a second chance to shine. Meanwhile, back in Crestwood, Karma was preparing its own surprise for 3 former bullies who thought their high school glory days were the peak of their lives. They had no idea that the boy they'd tormented was now worth $12 million. They had no idea that their class loser was being profiled in tech magazines and speaking at innovation conferences. Most importantly, they had no idea that Julian Crane was about to receive an invitation that would change everything. 5 years after graduation, life had delivered some harsh reality checks to Crestwood's former Golden Boys. Malcolm Carter's football dreams died on a rainy October afternoon during his sophomore year at State University. A knee injury that required 3 surgeries and endless physical therapy sessions that never quite brought back his speed or agility. The scholarship disappeared along with his starting position, and Malcolm found himself washing out of college with a useless communications degree and no backup plan. Now 23, Malcolm managed a night shift at Jenkins Auto Repair, the same shop where his father had worked for 30 years. The smell of motor oil and the sound of pneumatic tools had become the soundtrack to his diminished life. Instead of running through stadium tunnels to cheering crowds, Malcolm crawled under rusted pickup trucks belonging to people who barely remembered his high school glory days. Derek Thompson's basketball career followed a similarly brutal trajectory. The Division II scholarship led to 2 seasons riding the bench, watching younger, more talented players take the spotlight he'd always assumed was his by right. A growth spurt that never came in competition, that never stopped exposed the harsh truth. Being the best player in Crestwood didn't mean much in the real world. Derek now worked at his uncle's insurance office, processing claims and cold-calling potential customers who hung up on him daily. The athletic build that once commanded respect had softened into beginnings of a beer gut, and the confident swagger had been replaced by the defeated posture of someone who peaked at 17. Travis Mitchell's musical aspirations crashed the hardest of all. The record producer who had shown interest in his demo tape turned out to be more interested in separating hopeful teenagers from their money than launching careers. Travis spent 2 years in Nashville, sleeping on couches and playing dive bars for tips that barely covered gas money back to his car. He returned to Crestwood working at the electronics store in the dime mall, selling smartphones to the same classmates who once cheered his performances. His voice was still decent, but the industry had moved on without him, and at 23, Travis was already too old to be discovered. The 3 men who had once ruled Crestwood High now found themselves living remarkably ordinary lives in the same small town they'd once planned to leave in their rearview mirrors. On a particularly slow Tuesday evening, they found themselves at Murphy's Bar, the only establishment in Crestwood that stayed open past 9 p.m. The conversation inevitably drifted to past, as it always did when reality became too uncomfortable to face directly. Remember when we actually mattered? Derek said, staring into his 3rd beer of the night. When people knew who we were? Malcolm laughed bitterly. Those were the days, man, when being good at high school actually meant something. Travis was scrolling through social media on his phone, looking at the success stories of classmates who had moved on to bigger things. You know what we need? He said suddenly, his eyes lighting up with the first real enthusiasm he'd shown in months. The 10-year reunion is coming up. We should make it memorable. How? Malcolm asked, though something in Travis's tone suggested trouble. Remember Julian Crane? Travis's grin was the same one he'd worn before destroying Julian at the talent show. The class loser? I bet he's still the same pathetic nerd he always was. Probably still living with his mom, coding little games nobody plays. Derek perked up at the mention of their old favorite target. Oh man, Julian. I haven't thought about him in years. Wonder if he's still got those thick glasses and that weird stutter when he gets nervous. Malcolm's eyes narrowed with the predatory focus that had made him such an effective bully. You thinking what I think you're thinking? The reunion's the perfect setup, Travis explained, his voice taking on the persuasive quality that had once charmed teachers and parents. We invite Julian. Make it seem like we want to reconnect. Bury the hatchet. All that forgiveness garbage. Then, when he shows up expecting some kind of redemption story, we give everyone a good laugh at his expense. Derek finished, already caught up in the plan. One last hurrah before we all get too old for this stuff. Malcolm was nodding eagerly. It's perfect. He'll come because he's probably desperate for acceptance. Still the same insecure kid inside, I bet. And we get to relive the good old days when we actually had some power. They spent the next hour planning their approach. It had to seem genuine. They couldn't let Julian suspect their real intentions. They'd play the part of reformed bullies who wanted to make amends, who had matured beyond their high school cruelty. "I'll make the call," Malcolm volunteered. "I always was the best at selling a story." Travis raised his beer bottle in a mock toast to giving Julian Crane one last reminder of where he belongs in the food chain. The three men clinked bottles, completely oblivious of the fact that they were about to encounter a version of Julian Crane that existed beyond their wildest comprehension. In their minds, Julian was still the awkward 17-year-old they'd left behind in those hallways. They couldn't conceive of growth, transformation, or the possibility that their victim had become something they could never achieve, actually successful. The planning session continued until last call, with each man contributing details to their scheme. They discussed timing, logistics, and exactly how they'd spring their trap. The reunion would be held in the same gymnasium where they'd once been kings, and they were convinced that returning to their former domain would restore their old power. What they didn't understand was that power built on cruelty is always temporary. Real power, the kind Julian had spent 5 years building, doesn't depend on putting others down. As Malcolm pulled out his phone to find Julian's contact information, he was grinning with the same malicious satisfaction he'd worn while stealing lunch money in high school. They thought they were setting up Julian for failure. Instead, they were walking into their own reckoning. The trap they were laying would spring back on them in ways they couldn't possibly anticipate, and the class loser they planned to humiliate was about to give them a masterclass in what real success looks like. The Crestwood High Gymnasium had been transformed with golden streamers, twinkling lights and nostalgic displays showcasing the class of 2015's glory days. The same space where Julian had once been humiliated during pep rallies now buzzed with the nervous energy of adults trying to recapture their teenage relevance. Malcolm, Derek, and Travis stood near the entrance like predators waiting for prey, their eyes scanning every arrival. They had positioned themselves strategically, close enough to intercept Julian when he arrived, but with clear sight lines to ensure they wouldn't miss their moment of anticipated triumph. "There's Rebecca Martinez," Derek noted, watching their former classmate enter with her husband. "I heard she's a nurse practitioner now, making decent money." "And there's Kevin Wu," Travis added, spotting another classmate. "Started his own accounting firm. Guy's doing pretty well for himself." Malcolm's jaw tightened. Everyone seemed to be thriving, except them, which made their plan to humiliate Julian feel even more necessary, a way to remind themselves that at least they weren't the biggest losers from their graduating class. "He'll show," Malcolm said confidently. "Guys like Julian never miss a chance to prove they've changed. He's probably been practicing his little speech about how high school doesn't matter anymore." They had no idea how right and how catastrophically wrong they were. At 8:47 p.m., the gymnasium's double doors opened one more time. Julian Crane stepped inside, and the entire dynamic of the reunion shifted in an instant. The awkward teenager they remembered had been completely replaced by a man who commanded attention without seeking it. His tailored charcoal suit fit him perfectly, accentuating a frame that had filled out with quiet confidence. The thick glasses were gone, revealing sharp blue eyes that took in a room with calm assessment. His once messy hair was styled with precision, and when he smiled, genuinely smiled, it transformed his entire face. But it wasn't just his appearance that had changed. Julian carried himself with the unmistakable presence of someone who had achieved real success. Not the desperate tension-seeking of their high school years, but the quiet authority of a man who had nothing to prove and everything to be proud of. Conversations paused as classmates recognized him. Whispers began spreading across the gymnasium like wildfire. "Is that Julian Crane? No way. That can't be him. Holy shit, what happened to him?" Malcolm felt his stomach drop. This wasn't part of the plan. The Julian they'd expected to mock was supposed to be the same insecure kid they remembered, maybe with a better haircut and contact lenses, but essentially unchanged. This man walking toward them looked like he belonged in boardrooms, not getting stuffed into lockers. "That's not Julian," Derek whispered, though his voice lacked conviction. But it was Julian, and he was walking directly toward them with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. "Malcolm, Derek, Travis," Julian said, his voice deeper and steadier than they remembered. "Thank you for inviting me. It's been enlightening to reconnect with old friends." There was something in his tone that made Malcolm's carefully planned opening remarks evaporate from his mind. But old habits die hard, and Malcolm's default setting was still aggression. Well, look what the cat dragged in," Malcolm said, forcing his trademark smirk. "The class loser himself. What have you been up to, Julian? Still coding your little games in your mom's basement?" The question hung in the air, and Julian's smile never wavered. Around them, other classmates had begun to gather, sensing drama unfolding. "Actually," Julian replied calmly, "I founded a company called Noxterra Innovations. We develop AI-powered productivity solutions for Fortune 500 companies. Last quarter, we posted $12 million in revenue." The words hit Malcolm like a physical blow. Around them, classmates' eyes widened. $12 million in revenue wasn't just success. It was a kind of success that made everyone else's achievements look modest by comparison. Derek stepped forward, his face flushed with embarrassment, but still clinging to denial. "Come on, Julian. No need to make up stories to impress us. We're all friends here, right?" Julian pulled out his phone, not to show off, but with the casual confidence of someone stating simple facts. "Derek, I appreciate the skepticism. It shows you're thinking critically." He scrolled to a recent Forbes article featuring emerging tech entrepreneurs. "But I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. I'm here because you invited me." The article's headline was visible to several nearby classmates. "Silicon Valley's youngest millionaires, the innovators changing how we work." Julian's photo was prominently featured. Travis, desperate to regain some control of the situation, tried a different approach. "Okay, so you've done well for yourself. Good for you, Julian. But money isn't everything, right? I mean, some of us chose different paths. I've been pursuing music." "At the electronics store?" Julian interrupted gently. "I heard you were working at TechWorld in the mall." "There's nothing wrong with that, Travis. Honest work is always respectable." The casual way Julian delivered this information without malice, but with complete accuracy, devastated Travis more effectively than any cruel comeback could have. Julian knew exactly where they all worked, exactly how their dreams had played out, and he'd chosen to invite himself into their trap anyway. Rebecca Martinez, who had been listening nearby, stepped closer. "Julian, is this really you? I mean, I heard rumors about someone from our class making it big in tech, but I never imagined—" "It's really me," Julian confirmed, just with better glasses and significantly more funding. The crowd around them was growing. Word was spreading through the reunion that Julian Crane, was apparently some kind of millionaire tech entrepreneur. Former classmates who had barely acknowledged his existence were suddenly very interested in reconnecting. Malcolm felt the walls closing in. This was supposed to be their moment of triumph, their chance to relive the power dynamics that had once defined their worth. Instead, they were being publicly exposed as the failures they'd become. "Look, Julian," Malcolm said, his voice rising with desperation. "We may not have your fancy company or whatever, but we're still the same guys who ran this school. We had everything back then." "You had everything that mattered to teenagers," Julian corrected, his voice remaining perfectly calm. "Football trophies, popularity, the ability to make other people feel small. But here's what I learned after graduation. None of that translates to the real world." The gymnasium had grown noticeably quieter as more people tuned into the conversation unfolding at its center. Julian continued, not with cruelty, but with the patient tone of someone explaining simple facts. "Malcolm, your football career ended with an injury. That's not your fault. Injuries happen. But what did you do next? Derek, basketball didn't work out. Again, not uncommon. What was your backup plan?" Travis, the music industry is brutal. Most talented people don't make it. But what other skills did you develop? Each question landed like a precision strike. Julian wasn't attacking them. He was simply highlighting the reality they'd been avoiding for years. The difference between us, Julian said, addressing all three, but speaking loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear, is that when you were at your peak in high school, I was at my lowest. But I used that low point as motivation to build something real. You use your peak as an excuse to stop growing. Dr. Patricia Walsh, Julian's former mentor who had been invited as a faculty representative, appeared at the edge of the crowd. "Julian," she called out with genuine warmth, "I heard you were here tonight. Congratulations on the recent acquisition deal. 50 million, was it?" The number hit the crowd like a thunderbolt. 50 million wasn't just success. It was a kind of wealth that transformed entire communities. Julian nodded modestly. "The valuation, yes. Though I should clarify, that's the company's worth, not my personal net worth." "And what is your personal net worth?" someone from the crowd called out. Julian hesitated for just a moment, clearly uncomfortable with the question. "I don't usually discuss personal finances, but since we're all friends here," he paused, making eye contact with Malcolm, Derek, and Travis. "Around 12 million, give or take." The gymnasium erupted in whispers and shocked exclamations. $12 million. The boy they had tormented for being worthless was now worth more than most of them would earn in their entire lifetimes. But Julian wasn't finished. He was invited to give a speech, not because he demanded the spotlight, but because the reunion organizers suddenly realized they had actual celebrity in their midst. Standing at the microphone where Travis had once mocked his robot demonstration, Julian looked out at the faces of his former classmates. Some were awed, some were ashamed, some were calculating how to leverage this unexpected connection. "I was once the boy you laughed at," Julian began, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "Some of you ignored me. Some of you actively tormented me. And honestly, I understood why. I was different. I was awkward. I didn't fit into the social structures that seemed so important back then." He paused, making eye contact with individuals throughout the crowd. "But every time someone tried to knock me down, I used it as fuel to rise. Not because I wanted revenge. Revenge is exhausting and ultimately empty. I did it because I refused to let anyone else's opinion of my potential become my reality." The gymnasium was completely silent now. "Success isn't just about wealth or status," Julian continued. "It's about building something meaningful, treating people with dignity, and believing in yourself when no one else does. The boy you knew in high school had dreams that seemed impossible. The man standing here tonight learned that impossible just means no one's done it yet. Share this if you believe success is the best revenge." As Julian stepped away from the microphone, the applause was thunderous. But Malcolm, Derek, and Travis remained frozen in place, finally understanding the magnitude of their miscalculation. They had invited their former victim to mock him one last time. Instead, they had given him the perfect platform to demonstrate just how completely he had transcended everything they represented. The reunion officially ended at midnight, but the real conversations began in the parking lot as groups of former classmates stood around cars, processing what they had just witnessed. Julian Crane's transformation wasn't just personal success. It was a complete rewriting of everything they thought they knew about potential, worth, and the long-term consequences of how we treat others. For Malcolm, Derek, and Travis, the walk to their cars felt like a death march. The three men who had entered the gymnasium expecting to relive their glory days now faced a harsh reality that those glory days had been built on cruelty towards someone who had more potential than all of them combined. The boy they had called worthless was now worth $12 million. The loser they had planned to mock had just delivered a masterclass in dignity, success, and genuine leadership. Malcolm sat in his pickup truck for over 20 minutes before starting the engine, staring at the steering wheel as the weight of his actions over the past 5 years, and the past 10, settled on his shoulders like concrete. Derek called in sick to work the next morning, something he'd never done in 3 years at the insurance office. He spent the day walking around Crestwood, seeing his hometown through new eyes and wondering how many other people he had underestimated over the years. Travis deleted his social media accounts entirely. Every post about his music career and his complaint about not getting the recognition he deserved now felt like evidence of his own delusions. But Julian's impact on the reunion extended far beyond the three men who had tormented him. Rebecca Martinez, the nurse practitioner, approached Julian before he left that night. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I never stood up for you when I should have. I was so worried about my own social standing that I let terrible things happen right in front of me." Julian's response was characteristic of the man he had become. "Rebecca, you were 17. We all made choices based on what we thought mattered then. What matters now is how we choose to treat people going forward." Similar conversations were happening throughout the parking lot. Classmates who had been bystanders during Julian's torment were grappling with their own complicity. The reunion had become an unexpected mirror, forcing everyone to examine not just who they had become, but who they had been and what that meant for their character. But the most important conversations happened 3 days later, when Malcolm, Derek, and Travis each reached out to Julian separately. Malcolm's call came first. His voice was barely above a whisper when Julian answered. "Julian, it's Malcolm. I know I have no right to ask for your time, but I need to say something." Julian, who was in his Silicon Valley office reviewing quarterly reports, set aside his work and gave Malcolm his full attention. "I was wrong," Malcolm continued. "Not just about you, but about everything. I built my entire identity around being superior to people like you, and when that fell apart, I didn't know who I was anymore. Instead of growing up, I tried to drag you back down to where I thought you belonged. I'm sorry. That's not enough, but it's all I have." Julian's response surprised Malcolm with its gentleness. "Malcolm, apology accepted. But more importantly, what you can do now. You can't change the past, but you can still change your future." The conversation lasted an hour. By the end of it, Malcolm had agreed to enroll in community college courses and begin working toward a degree in automotive technology, turning his current job into the foundation for a potential career rather than just a paycheck. Derek's apology came in the form of a handwritten letter delivered to Julian's corporate office, a gesture that required Derek to look up Noxterra Innovations' address and confront the reality of Julian's success all over again. The letter was 3 pages long, detailing not just Derek's remorse about high school, but his recognition that his pattern of putting others down had continued into adulthood. He wrote about missed opportunities, failed relationships, and the gradual realization that his need to feel superior to others had prevented him from developing any actual superior qualities. Julian called Derek personally after receiving the letter. "Your honesty means everything," Julian told him. "But Derek, you're only 23. You have decades to build something meaningful. The question is, what do you want to build?" That conversation led to Derek leaving the insurance office and enrolling in a physical therapy program at the regional medical center. He wanted to help people recover from injuries. Partly, he admitted to Julian, as a way of making amends for the emotional injuries he had caused. Travis took the longest to reach out, but his approach was the most creative. He wrote and recorded a song, not for fame or recognition, but as a genuine expression of remorse. The lyrics were simple but heartfelt, acknowledging the pain he had caused and expressing hope for redemption. He sent the recording to Julian with a simple message. "This isn't for anyone else. It's for you, and for the kid I should have been friends with instead of tormenting." Julian listened to the song in his car after a board meeting, and for the first time since the reunion, he felt truly emotional about the whole experience. Not because the song was professionally polished, it wasn't, but because it represented genuine growth and vulnerability from someone who had once used his talents to cause pain. Julian called Travis immediately. The song was beautiful, Travis, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. "You have talent, I always knew that, but now you're using it to heal instead of hurt." Travis ended up taking a job at a local music therapy program, working with children who had experienced trauma. His musical abilities, combined with his newfound empathy, made him surprisingly effective at helping young people process difficult emotions through creative expression. The ripple effects extended throughout Crestwood and beyond. Dr. Patricia Walsh, Julian's former mentor, used his story as inspiration for a new scholarship program at the community college. The Julian Crane Innovation Scholarship will provide full tuition and mentorship for students from underprivileged backgrounds who showed exceptional potential in technology fields. Julian not only funded the scholarship, but insisted on remaining actively involved in mentoring recipients. "I had one person believe in me when it mattered most," he told Dr. Walsh. "Now we can be that person for others." The Crestwood High administration, embarrassed by the revelation that they had failed to protect a student who went on to achieve extraordinary success, implemented new anti-bullying programs and invited Julian to speak at graduation ceremonies about resilience and the long-term impact of how we treat others. Julian's company, MILLIONAIR Innovations, established a satellite office in Crestwood, not out of nostalgia, but as part of a broader initiative to bring high-tech jobs to smaller communities. The move created 45 positions for local residents and began attracting other tech companies to the area. But perhaps the most significant change was in Julian himself. The reunion had forced him to confront his own past in a way he hadn't expected. While he had achieved extraordinary professional success, he realized he had been carrying the emotional weight of those high school years longer than necessary. Forgiving Malcolm, Derek, and Travis, and seeing their genuine efforts to change, finally allowed Julian to release that burden entirely. He began speaking at high schools around the country, sharing his story not as a tale of revenge, but as proof that potential exists in everyone, especially those who seem different or difficult to understand. The kids who get picked on today might be running companies tomorrow. Julian would tell audiences of students and educators. But more importantly, the kids doing the picking need to understand that cruelty has consequences that extend far beyond high school hallways. The three men who had once tormented Julian became some of his most effective advocates in spreading this message. They would speak honestly about their past behavior and its impact, helping other potential bullies understand the long-term damage they could cause, not just to their victims, but to their own character development. 5 years after the reunion, Crestwood had become known throughout the region not for its football team or its small-town charm, but for its innovative approach to addressing bullying and developing untapped potential in all students. Julian's story had transformed not just his own life, but an entire community's understanding of worth, potential, and the power of second chances. Today, Julian Crane sits in the executive suite of MILLIONAIR Innovations headquarters, overlooking Silicon Valley from the 42nd floor of a building that bears his company's name. The awkward teenager who once coded alone in a school library now leads a team of over 200 employees across 3 continents. His AI productivity solutions are used by companies that generate trillions of dollars in revenue annually. But success, Julian learned, isn't measured solely in dollars or market share. The real victory lies in the transformation of 4 lives, his own and those of 3 former enemies who became unlikely advocates for change. Malcolm now runs the automotive technology program at Crestwood Community College, teaching students that manual skills combined with technical knowledge can build meaningful careers. Derek manages a physical therapy department at Regional Medical Center, helping people rebuild their bodies and their confidence after injuries. Travis leads the most successful music therapy program in the state, using his talents to heal children who have faced trauma. None of them are millionaires, but all of them have found something more valuable than wealth: purpose, dignity, and the satisfaction that comes from building others up instead of tearing them down. Julian's story teaches us 4 life-changing lessons that everyone needs to understand. First, your current circumstances do not determine your final destination. When Julian was getting his lunch money stolen and his homework scattered across hallways, no one would have predicted he'd become a tech mogul worth $12 million. When Malcolm was a football captain with a full scholarship, no one would have guessed he'd find his calling as a community college instructor. Life has a way of surprising us, but only if we stay open to growth and change. The mistake most people make is assuming that how things are now is how they'll always be. High school popularity doesn't guarantee adult success. Early struggles don't predict lifetime failure. Your story is still being written, and you hold the pen. Second, every setback contains the seeds of comeback. Julian didn't succeed despite being bullied. He succeeded because being bullied taught him resilience, empathy, and the determination to prove that everyone deserves respect. The pain he experienced became the fuel for his transformation. The isolation forced him to develop skills that eventually made him irreplaceable in the business world. This doesn't mean suffering is good or that bullying is acceptable. It means that you have the power to transform your pain into purpose, your struggles into strength, and your setbacks into comebacks. The question isn't whether you'll face difficulties. It's whether you'll use them as stepping stones or stumbling blocks. Third, true success means lifting others as you rise. Julian could have used his wealth and influence for revenge. He could have bought out the businesses where his former tormentors worked and fired them. He could have publicly humiliated them the way they had humiliated him. Instead, he chose a different path. He funded scholarships for underprivileged students. He brought jobs to his hometown. He mentored young entrepreneurs who reminded him of his former self. He even helped his former bullies find better paths forward. That's the mark of genuine success, using your advantages to create opportunity for others, not to settle old scores. Real power isn't about domination. It's about elevation. When you reach the top, the test of your character is whether you pull the ladder up behind you or extend it down to help others climb. Fourth, everyone deserves a second chance to show who they can become. Malcolm, Derek, and Travis were cruel teenagers who grew into disappointed adults. They could have remained bitter, angry, and stuck in their past glory days. Instead, when confronted with the consequences of their actions, they chose growth over stagnation, accountability over denial, and service over selfishness. People can change. Not everyone will, but everyone can. The teenager who bullies others might become the teacher who protects the vulnerable. The adult who has lost their way might find a new path that leads to meaning and contribution. But change only happens when we believe it's possible and when we're willing to support people through the difficult process of transformation. Julian's forgiveness didn't excuse his former tormentor's behavior. It freed all of them to become better versions of themselves. These lessons aren't just inspiring stories. They're practical principles you can apply starting today. Stop letting other people's opinions define your potential. The kid everyone counted out might be the adult everyone looks up to. Don't let anyone else's limited vision become your ceiling. Use your struggles as fuel, not excuses. Every challenge you face is developing muscles you'll need for future success. Physical training breaks down muscle fibers so they can rebuild stronger. Life challenges break down limiting beliefs so you can rebuild with greater capacity. Look for ways to help others climb. Success without significance is ultimately hollow. The most fulfilling achievements are those that create value for other people. Whether you're mentoring a colleague, volunteering in your community, or simply treating everyone with dignity, you're building the kind of success that lasts. Give people room to grow, including yourself. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago, and you won't be the same person 5 years from now. Other people deserve the same opportunity for evolution that you want for yourself. Like if Julian's story inspired you to see your own potential differently. Subscribe for more soul-igniting transformations that prove ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things. Comment below with your own story of overcoming underestimation, or share a time when someone surprised you with their growth. Share this video to remind someone in your life that their current chapter isn't their final story. Julian Crane's journey from class loser to millionaire entrepreneur isn't just one man's success story. It's proof that resilience, determination, and treating others with dignity can overcome any obstacle and transform any life. The quiet kid sitting alone at lunch today might be running a Fortune 500 company tomorrow. The adult who feels stuck in a dead-end job might be one decision away from discovering their true calling. The person who hurt others in the past might become their greatest advocate for change. Your potential is unlimited. Your past doesn't define you. Your future is unwritten. The only question is, what story will you choose to tell? But Julian's story isn't the only one where the underdog rises to change everything. Next week, I'll share the incredible journey of Maria Gonzalez, a single mother who went from cleaning office buildings to owning the company that employed her former boss. Her transformation will show you why you should never underestimate the power of quiet determination. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this extraordinary story here on Soul Igniting Story. I truly appreciate you for taking the time to be with us, to open your heart, and to let these words spark something within your soul. Every story we share is crafted to inspire, to uplift, and to remind us all that love, hope, and resilience are alive in every corner of the world. If the story touched you, made you smile, or even brought a little spark of wonder to your day, I would be so grateful if you could show your support. Please give this video a like. It helps more souls discover these stories. Don't forget to leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, feelings, or even your own experiences connected to the story. Your words make this community come alive. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next beautiful journey we'll be sharing together. Until next time, thank you again for being part of the Soul Igniting Story family, where every story lights a flame within.